To quickly walk you through the assignments for week 1. We'll start with a completely fresh install of TI Publisher. So first thing we need to do is upload the DODIS documents for the workshop assignments. So we start by logging in. The user is TI Demo and password is demo. Now we are not allowed to upload into any collection as the IDEMO user, but we can upload something into the playground. So we switch to that. And now you see a new panel appearing on top right here, the upload panel. If you're using the release candidate of TI Publisher 6, then this panel will actually be at the bottom of the page, but we moved it up here because some people reported problems finding it. So in this panel, we click on the upload button, navigate to the DODIS collection, which I checked out locally, and I just highlight all the files and say open, and now they have been uploaded already. The next step would be to create an auth of our own with which we can work. So we scroll down to the bottom of the page and there's this little form for creating a new ODD, and I will just call this DODIS Wolf to distinguish it from the ODDs created by other people, and I have to give it a title and then click on create. So as a result, a new empty auth will pop up here. We can click on this and get a new browser tab where we see the graphical ODD editor, and we can start working in here. But first, let's have a look at the actual document. So going back to the TI Publisher main window, I will just click on the first document. The way it is rendered here, that's using the default ODD, and we now want to switch it to the newly created ODD, which we are going to edit. So we click on this sidebar button, and there we can switch from TI Publisher base, which is the default auth being used, to my DODIS Wolf ODD. So now my DODIS Wolf ODD is being used, which you can also see in the browser's location bar because the URL has changed and it clearly states ODD equals DODIS Wolf. That's what we want. Otherwise, not much has changed because obviously our ODD is still empty. We have not added any rules to it. So if we go to the graphical ODD editor, it's empty. Well, in fact, it's not actually empty because there's auth inheritance. So our ODD will inherit the rules which are already present in tipublisher.auth, which is the base default auth. And this auth again inherits all the rules from an ODD called tiSimplePrint.auth, which is an ODD created by the TI community, which has default renditions for the few hundred most commonly used TI elements. Which is why if we look at our text without having made any modifications, it still looks somewhat readable. Okay, so the first assignment was to highlight this little bit here, gemeinsame Erklärung aller Fraktionen, which in the XML is actually marked up as emph, so should have an emphasis. We can always look at the XML when we are in the document view by going to download XML, and here we see our document and we can scroll down to the actual document body, and where is it? So here we have this env element I just mentioned. So we want to format that and make it bold or italic or something like that. So we go to the editor, and obviously we need to add an element spec, so an element specification for the element called env. So we type it in here, click on the plus, and we get a new element specification which is still completely empty. So next step is to add a model to this specification. We can leave it at the default settings here because we want behavior inline. It's obviously an inline element, not a block element or heading or anything. So this is okay. The only thing we want to do is add an output rendition, which we can do by clicking on the plus sign next to renditions. So, and in here we can just enter whatever CSS we like. So in this case, we will just do font style italic. And then we click on save. And the save step takes a bit of time because it does actually compile the ODT into code executable by exist. So this is a step which is always required, and in the graphical editor it's done automatically for you, so you don't need to buffer with it. So we go back to our window and then we just do a browser reload. So I click on the reload button in my browser, and as you can see, our env element is now properly formatted in italic. Next assignment was to assign some color to the names of people in this document. So there are names like here, this Courtnier, other names like Bebov, A.M. Meckel, and so on. And we would like those names, which are actually marked up in the document as first name, to appear in color, say orange. If we look at the XML, then yes, we can see that, for example, Klaus Jacobi is tagged as a first name with a reference. Courtnier is tagged as well. So we can just add another rule for first name. Again, click on the plus here to create an empty element spec, so there's nothing in there. We create a model. Again, we don't need to change anything. The default inline behavior is just what we want, so we add a rendition. And in here we just say color orange. Save again. Switch to TI Publisher document view, do a browser reload, and we can see all the people properly marked in orange. Next assignment was to move the date line to the right. So again, we go back to the editor. We create an element spec for date line. And in this case, you can see that it's not empty, but it already has a model. This is because it inherits a model already from one of its ancestor ODDs. So in this case, dateline already uses behavior block, which is what we want. So all we need to do is go to renditions again and say text align right in CSS to make it align right. We save again, go back to the document view, click reload, and we can see the date has properly moved to the right. So the next assignment was to format the heading. If we look at the XML, then the heading is quite a complex piece because, well, it uses the TI head element to indicate that this is a series of headings. But inside, it uses the title element to distinguish different types of headings. So it has title type main and it has title type sub. And in addition to this, we also have this ref up there, which links to the corresponding entry in the DODIS database. So basically, we want to turn all three things into proper titles, or rather, well, would probably like to render the ref a bit smaller, the title type main as main title, and title type sub again a bit smaller. So to do so, we go to our ODD editor again, and we need to add a rule for title. So as you can see, for title, there is already an element spec and it has quite a lot of distinctions. But to make things easy, we can just add 2 more distinctions on top. So we add another model. And we want this model to only apply for title type main. So we can use a predicate expression to restrict this model to titles of type main. We want this to appear as a proper heading, so we switch the behavior from inline to heading. And that's already it for now. We also have this other case of title type sub. So we add 1 more model and again switch behavior to heading, and the predicate in this case would be type equals sub. And we want this subtitle to appear a bit smaller. I will soon show you how to do it properly, but for now we can also just add some CSS and say font size, I don't know, 20 pixel. So we save this. Look at our document again. And you see we are getting close. So the next assignment is to make the ref link in the header less prominently. At the moment, the link here, which leads to the DODIS database entry for this document, is rendered as big as the main heading and thus catches the reader's eyes too quickly. So we may want this to appear in smaller print and maybe also move it to the right side of the document. So we go to our auto editor again, and we need to add a specification for the ref element. As you can see, this also has default models being applied, and actually we want to preserve this as a link. So basically the rule down here is the one we want to extend. So instead of just creating a completely new model, we can also copy this existing model by clicking on copy, and then up here on top we click on paste. And we get a new model inserted, which is a copy of the model down there. So we have all the parameters already in place. And all we need to do is add another rendition. So we want the font size to be smaller. So in this case, we just set it to 19. And we want it to be right aligned. So text align right. We click save again. Go back to the document, reload. And well, we get the output in smaller print, but it's not right aligned. Why is that? Well, a link element in HTML is always an inline element. So it appears in a sequence of text. And inline elements cannot be right aligned by themselves. Only blocks can be aligned. So we need to turn this inline element into a block. In CSS, there's actually an easy way to do it because we can just add another property, display block. So this will change the default inline into a block and tell the browser that this is a block element. And block elements can be right aligned. So save it. Go back to the document, reload, and we see it's nicely aligned to the right. However, if we scroll down a bit, we see this footnote number 1, and unfortunately now all the links appearing in there are also block level elements and they are right aligned. This is not what we wanted. So what's the issue? Well, the problem is that right now our new model, which we added on top of all the other models, it will always be applied because it's the first matching model. It always matches. So the algorithm will never even look at the remaining models. What do we need to do? Well, we need to limit this model to the particular case where we want it to be applied, which basically is only apply it if your immediate parent element is a head element. So we can formulate this in XPath as a predicate, parent, head. Yeah, so this particular rule is only applied if the direct parent is a head element, but not if it's a paragraph or a footnote or anything else. So we save again, go back to our document. Still, we get right aligned link up here, rendered as block, but now down in the footnote, all the links are properly inlined again as we wanted. Okay, next assignment is to show the subtitle in smaller print. We actually already did this. However, we were using a fixed font size, which for a heading is not such a good idea because you actually want the heading to conform to the general look and feel of your application. So all the headings should somehow follow the same style guidelines. And if you set a fixed font size within the auth for a particular heading, then you are interfering with this general style guide. You know? So it's not a good idea. A better way to do it is to actually pass a parameter to the heading. So the behavior heading, which we use for title, does have a parameter called level. Level 1 is like the biggest heading in your document. Level 6 would be like the smallest heading in an HTML document. So what we want here is to turn this into a smaller heading. So we do level 3. And now we can also remove the fixed font size because we don't need it anymore. So we save this. Go back to the document, reload, and we see that it's now rendered as a heading on level 3, a little bit smaller. Then the final assignment was to format the date popover. So if we move our mouse over the date here, we get this popover, but what it shows us is a normalized date in XML schema date format. So we would like to format this in a nicer way, maybe also taking into account the user's language, which in my case would be German. So I would like to see something like Montag, 18. April, and in English you would want Monday, April 18th or similar. So we can do that. in this case, we need to format the date element. So if we look at the XML, then we can see that we have inside the date line this date element, and it has a when attribute with this normalized date in it. So we go to the ODD. We need to create another element spec for date. And again, date already has some default models, but there's one which actually matches our case. So that's the alternate here, which has this when predicate. So it's only applied if there is a when predicate. And that's exactly what we want. You can also see that the upward two models only apply if output mode is print. So they won't apply to the web. So if we open this existing model to change it slightly, we can see that it already uses behavior alternate, and it defines the two parameters which are always required for alternate. So they are defined in the specification. There's one parameter called default, which resembles the text, which should be displayed inline, so without the mouse over, and there's alternate, which is the alternate state, so the content which should appear if I mouse over the element. At the moment, this just outputs when, but without any formatting, so all we see is the normalized date. And we would like to turn this into a proper date using our local system language. Fortunately, there's a function for that in the XPath specification. It's called format date, and it takes two parameters. The first parameter is the date to format, and the second parameter is a template, which uses a certain syntax to determine what to output. I will not explain this in detail because it's rather complex template language here, but if you go to the specification, then there are examples which you can just copy, like I do, or you can read more about the meaning of the single template parameters. So here I will just basically output the name of the day of the week, then an ordinal number corresponding to the day, so 4th, then the month written out, and the year. So we save this. And go to the document, reload. And I move my mouse over the date. And as you can see, I'm now getting a properly formatted written out date in German, which is my system's language. So if you wanted this to appear in a different language, you would need to pass another parameter to format date, indicating the language you would like to see. Yeah, but with this you can experiment yourself, and that's it for this week, and see you for the next session.